What's up, everybody? It's Johnny King, and here on another episode of the Becoming Kings podcast, I've got a king in the making on the show here, Brian Pickowicz. I love that. It just rolls off the tongue. It's so easy. It's so easy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. I've heard that the name is very easy. I never get questions, so
You never get questions. It never gets butchered. Yeah.
no.
No, I love it. We were just talking before we started rolling on the recording that you got a puppy that's a little bit older than mine, probably a month older. But you and I are both going
Yeah.
through puppy growing problems, growing
Oh
pains.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've always loved dogs. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, and you know, we had like four dogs growing up, and you could let your dog out, and like we had 7 acres and lived on this mountain in New Hampshire, and we could just let our dogs out except one of them, and they just kind of like live their life, and they
Yeah.
come back, and like it's a normal thing. So I'm very fond of dogs, and my fiance um had a different experience with dogs, and not that like she didn't like them, but she was like, oh, they're nice, like they're cool, but it was its own little thing. And so very fascinating to be able to see, like, when we had Alfie come in and we started to get him, um she got really attached to him like
Mm,
really fast.
mm.
And so it it's turned out well. We decided to bring him into our house, and now he's part of our family. So
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, it's interesting because it's not my first puppy, but it's probably the first. It's the first puppy that I've had where it's just like my sole responsibility. I had one 15 years ago in a relationship, and so it was kind of our puppy. But it's like all of a sudden, there's another level of like, oh my gosh, it's like a child. I have to
yeah,
care for this. I have to keep it safe. I have to like, I'm
I have
like
to wake
overly
up in the morning
protective. Yeah.
to get him out. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's a
exactly.
blessing though.
It is. It is. It's good. Creates good discipline, but also is why I was about 10 minutes late getting on because he would not poop. Come on now, like I should have that down by 10 weeks. Should
Yeah, you
poop on
gotta kind of
demand.
like walk him through like the same
Yeah,
like a trail almost. That's kind of what I
yeah,
found.
yeah. Totally, totally. Well, um, I'll mention for those that don't know you, we met at a mastermind of
Hmm.
a former, well, I should say not a former, but a mutual buddy of ours in 2018. And I know for myself, man, I was searching. I had been doing health coaching with women, and I was needing a change. I met you. I think you were searching as well. I think a lot of us in that mastermind were searching for answers in certain areas of our business and certain areas of our life. But it's been pretty fun to see you grow from what I can see, at least exponentially since then,
Mm.
just over the course of like 2 or 3 years, and now you're engaged and, you're just growing up so fast.
I appreciate it, brother. Yeah, I mean, I think for me at the time it was really challenging because my journey, my experience was I started out with competitive bodybuilding,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like my sole focus. Like I said, I grew up in a town of like 750 people. Um, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity. There was a lot of people who stayed in that area, and they weren't bad people, but it was very limited in the scope of impact and the scope of what you could actually do. And so I went to college. I studied political science, and I was going to get a law degree. And when I was going through school, I had a lot of great opportunities. I interned for a lot of the presidential campaigns in New Hampshire. There's so much politics that goes on because it's the
Mm-hmm.
first in the country primary. So I was on the Today Show at one point, and I got to debate Donald Trump live. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was like in it. I met President Obama. Like, I was like so in this thing, but at the same time, I was working three jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I was working three jobs, 60 hours a week. I was going to school. I started playing college football. Like, there was all these different pieces, but as this is going on, I started to see my family really start to decline. My dad had MS. My mom was in really poor health, and between financial burden of life, um, and stress and depression and all these different pieces, I I was out of alignment, and I needed something. I
Mm-hmm.
needed something to keep me going forward, and it became bodybuilding. And so bodybuilding was such a grounding thing because I recognized that if I gave myself just an hour per week or hour per day, go in the gym and push and just give myself this like outlet. It became this way to focus all this energy. And e- even though things were falling apart around me, I was doing okay in school, but like at one point I was like really failing. And
Mhm.
I was just so like, what am I trying to do? I'm working full time in a sales position, doing all these different pieces, but I don't have my footing on me. And bodybuilding became that for me. I was like, okay, I understand. I read Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography. I was like, okay, I can become a bodybuilder. I can move to Los Angeles. I can, make it successfully, and then maybe I'll become so wealthy and successful that I can take that and move into politics.
Mhm.
And that's where I started,
Hmm.
and I was extremely successful. Like I competed in 5 years, three competitions. I did photo shoots. I was in amazing shape, and I learned how to build an online coaching company. So, and this is in 2015, 2016, before really it was so new to the market that
Mhm.
things went really well. I made really good money coming out of college. Um, and my fiance was kind of in the same place. She started competing and she started her business. And so we had these two companies that were doing really well coaching. I was like, you know what, we're online. Let's move to Los Angeles. And so we moved to LA. We lived there for 2 years or we lived there for 2 years. But in the first year, I did my first competition out there and I was in it. Like I was living, training at Gold's Gym. All the bodybuilders are there. And I was like, these guys are broke. They're not healthy. And I was spending most of my time talking to clients about their life.
Mhm.
Like, what do you like? How are you? Like, I wanted to talk to people about real things. I didn't want to just talk about the macros and why you should do bicep curls this way. And that's what people wanted, and that's what people needed. They needed to have these deeper conversations, and the those were the things that were stopping them from making progress. And so I started to really coach people in this way and understand that there's other mechanisms that keep people from being healthy
Mhm.
rather than just the knowledge of, well, what kind of food should I eat and how should I work out.
Mhm.
So I decided to stop competing.
Mhm.
I just started. I was like, hey, this isn't for me. I don't want. My grandfather had had a stroke. He'd had multiple heart attacks, and I know what goes into bodybuilding long term. And I was like, I don't want to be living that life. Like, there's an element of you sacrifice something in order to get something, right? So you do have to push yourself. Like, you do have to sometimes as an athlete put your health on the line, but there's no payoff in bodybuilding. It's not like, Kobe Bryant tears his Achilles, comes up, shoots two free throws. Like, that's okay. Like, I'm okay with that because there's also a payoff.
Mhm.
Bodybuilding, there wasn't any payoff. So I had this like really hard time letting it go. And after that, it was trying to figure out like what is my new mission, like what is my vision, what am I trying to create for myself. And I think that's where we kind of had that intersection of, all right, I'm still in this coaching space. I'm still healthy. I'm still trying to coach people on their fitness, but I don't know. Is it life coaching? Is it wellness coaching? Is it starting another company altogether and really thinking bigger as an entrepreneur?
Mm.
So I think that was really like our intersection, and it really was me trying to seek more knowledge on what to pursue and where to go.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's been. I mean, I've been blessed to have known you as long as I've known you, but it's been pretty cool to see. Again, it's and I think a lot of guys that are listening, hopefully, maybe not, knock on wood, that they're resonating from the standpoint of like something that they've pursued, has had a shelf life, or they've just gotten unfulfilled. As when I met you, I'd been doing it for 7, 8 years, coaching and gyms, and I was like, I needed another level of challenge, or I was
Mm.
evolving emotionally and mentally out of an older version of me. So it's like I'm like a snake, and I'm shedding my skin into something because I'm expanding. So
Yeah.
what was it for you that allowed you to, because that's scary, I think, to let go of something that's successful, to let go of an old identity. What were you in pursuit of really that allowed you to kind of make that leap?
Well, yeah, and it was a physical identity too because I was so used to people looking at me as this big guy, and
Mm.
you automatically have significance.
Right.
Like you automatic like, oh wow. I mean, I still get that because I'm very fit still, but it's not nearly the same amount of attention as it was for my physique. and people, oh my god, like how do you look like that? And like it was just such an ego trip. And so for me, what I would say is it took a tremendous amount of pain and suffering in order to get to the other side of it. And going through that I mean, there's been a lot of pain and suffering throughout the course of that. Like even moving to LA, like there was months where we're like, holy shit, like how are we going to pay the rent? And then Lindsay and I are so on opposite pages. We're like laying in we went to Miami for a bodybuilding competition, and we're laying decided to stay an extra day, and we're going to go check out the beach. And we didn't go to the beach. We spent like 8 hours talking about, hey, this isn't working. and and I think that we should not be together. And what are we trying to do here? And then at the same time, like after leaving bodybuilding, I felt so small, and like not like physically, but like I don't know the next move. And I had some things that came up that really got me in this place of like, yeah, you don't know who you are, you don't know what you can do. You, I had this one conversation with someone at the gym once, and they made me feel like the most insignificant person in the world. And it is a long story, but it was just like so like, wow, like this is not this isn't who I want to be. This isn't how I want to show up, and this isn't the life I want. And so coming out of that, I would say that there was a lot of things that were hits, right? And the thing about your journey is like you have moments where it's like you have a peak. Like so we went through this, I joined the mastermind, I started figuring out my coaching. I started figuring out some of the mechanisms. Things started going really well, and we ended up getting this opportunity to live with a client. So I had this client who I met. I was working with his brother. I met him in New Hampshire. He's like, you know what? He hands me Jesse Itzler's book, "Living with a SEAL," which is about David Goggins living in Jesse Itzler's house. And he's like, you know what? I've been thinking about having someone come live with me and train me. And I was like, I can do that. And it kind of like a comical thing. And then the next day I see him again. He's like, I've really been thinking about having someone come live with me. And I was like, that's like this guy has 3,500 employees. He's built a business from scratch. They're one of the most successful companies in their industry in the whole world.
Yeah.
Once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm going to take it. And so we moved in with him. And at that point, my business was like really growing. And then it kind of came to a crashing halt. So I had this great experience, but now I'm like I was so holding on to who I had been before that experience. It's like, oh no, I'm supposed to be coaching people like at this. And then the business starts to slowly decline. And I was so focused on one thing, I wasn't looking at the other opportunities that were presented to me. I kind of fast forward a little bit, but we ended up moving with him again. He's like, if you move to Dallas, I'll work with you full time. Move in with him again, and then I get fired. So I got fired from him. There's a long story short, we got let go in a polite way. It wasn't like a burning bridges moment, but it certainly there was some ashes on the bridges, and that really shocked me. And then everything else of that after that got even worse. Like I tried restarting the company. I was like, what am I trying to do? Like, hey, I need to continue to coach people. I need to continue to grow the business, and things after every single step got worse. And so I reached this point where I launched a program. It died. And I hit this, like, I'd never hit depression, but I was in depression. Like, I just couldn't get up. I had some really dark thoughts. I was like, should I even be here anymore? Like, what am I, like, it was just so hard for me to figure out, like, I have failed in such a massive way. I had been rising and rising and rising, and then it just all came crashing down, like to the point where, in credit card debt to like almost $20,000. I'd invested in this mastermind, had no ROI. My relationship's falling apart. Lindsay and I are always fighting. Like it's just like this horrible experience, and I'm like on an island. And what got me out of that was I was been started running because we lived on this lake. There's like this 10 mile loop, and every time I would run, like even if it was like 3 miles, I saw this sign that said half marathon run or whatever. And I was like, maybe that's something I should do. Like, I wonder if I could actually push myself to do that. Yeah. And a week out from the half marathon. I hadn't trained for it, hadn't prepped for it. I was like, I'm gonna go fucking run the half marathon.
Yeah.
And I signed up, and that experience got me back into alignment with what I know that I needed, which was a reconnection with myself, reconnection with my core, my energy, like the things that make me feel passionate. Because I was so trying to be validated by everything external that I wasn't in touch with what actually drove me, my core drivers. And and from seeing that, I started to think more about how I was impacting myself through my actions, but also how I was impacting other people. And I just shut everything down. After that, I took a full month off of everything, nothing, like just disappeared. And I got back to, hey, what is actually important right now? What am I trying to do? How am I actually working into people's lives? Like, why am I even trying to do this at all? And as I started to kind of piece things back together, things started to move in a positive direction. I had to baby step my way, but I ended up reaching out to that client who we moved to Dallas, and I said, "Hey, you know what? I feel like our last exchange, I screwed up. I feel like I left it on bad terms. I feel like there was something I said that really wasn't positive, and I wasn't even being grateful for the opportunity you'd given me. I would really like the opportunity to bring you to lunch, apologize, take you out, and just kind of mend some fences." And this guy, like I said, he's at everyone is trying to get to him, and also everyone's trying to take his money. So that was kind of the exchange. Essentially, he wanted us to stay for an extra week, and I was like, "Hey, that's great. Are we going to get compensated?" And it was just presented the wrong way. It wasn't out of malicious intent, but it just wasn't received well. And he's like, "You know what?" He's like, "I appreciate you so much for even asking. Yeah, let's meet up." And so I met up with him. We talked. I apologized, and he's like, "I just really appreciate that." And he's like, "Here's why I did that. Here's what to do. Like, this is why that. Like, this is our relationship." And he ended up hiring us back, and we've worked with them for the last on and off for the last 2 years. So it was really just I needed to stop. I needed to stop trying to prove anything. I needed to get back to myself. And as soon as I did that, things got better. They didn't get perfect, but things got better. And I started to actually look at the things that had gone wrong and why things had gone wrong and what had I done to get myself in that position. And from there, I just started to make them better. One step, one little thing. Let's look at the relationship. Let's look at this other relationship that I have with this client. Let's look at why I'm actually trying to help people. What are the things I need to adjust inside my world and my reality? Because if things aren't going well, it's my fault, and I need to stop trying to fix the external. And I need to get back to my source.
There's so many different things that you brought up there that I'd love to talk about, whether it be the ego, the kind of the shift you made when you decided just to do the half marathon. I also want to kind of talk one point into the fact that you're asking such quality questions of yourself that are curiosity founded. You're like, oh, why am I, or how, or I like the introspection. I think a lot of guys can take note of, like, this is how a lot of times the work is done. You have to slow down. You took a month off after the half marathon to just reflect and start asking some big questions. But I think that's the scary thing, because what answers are we going to find within? But let me ask you, going back to, because like I said, I have several questions. Going back to the half marathon, the how is that you decided within a week to do a half marathon, right? But what was it that, was it just the fact that you did something that was really hard and that was really more focused on your desire to, like, internal progress versus external progress, or what was it? Because I want guys to kind of take away like that shift, right?
That's a beautiful question, and I'm really glad you asked it. So, as I'm running this half marathon, like, I had been running, so it wasn't like I'm like off the couch and just doing this thing. But I had never run a half marathon. I'm not a runner.
It's
Like,
still
I'm
a long
not.
ways.
Oh yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, I'm not like, this isn't like a thing that I was used to. So, um, what happened was I show up, And if you do a race, which I didn't know, they have different markers for like how fast you should run. Like, you know,
Yeah.
this is the pace setter, this is the pace setter, this is the pace setter.
Yeah.
Well, I'm standing there and I just kind of line up and I'm like in between a 7.5 minute mile and an 8 minute mile.
Yeah. That's
And
fast.
there's a part of me that's like, you know, oh, I should probably like go to the back and like just kind of run it. And I was like, no, let's stay fucking right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see
Let's
what we can
push.
do. And so the first 4 miles, 5 miles, like I'm keeping pace and it's actually going pretty easy. I got all this adrenaline and it's going really well. And I'm like, wow, like I feel like, okay, this is like really going well. And then this is the thing that actually got me out of that state was I started to slow down
Mm.
and people start kind of passing me. And I'm like, you know, in my head, I can hear my time going from like 7.5 to 7:15 to like 7:45, 8:15, 8:35. And I was like, you know, it's okay. Like it's really okay. Like, you know, that'll be really nice and you know, people will still be like really proud of you for, you know, doing like half marathons would be really cool and like, you know, you can post about it on social media. And I had this moment I was like, but you will know that you didn't push. You will know that you didn't do everything that you could
Hmm.
to get to that finish line. You know that you will have taken the easy route, and you also know that you have more to give.
Totally.
So for the next, so I think it was at mile like 5 or 6, but for the rest of the race, I went into this fucking zone,
Mm.
and I just because there's other things too. Like I was pacing myself against other people, and I was like, "Huh, that's really interesting." Or well, how come when I run by someone who's looking at me, I make eye contact with them, and I try to smile at them.
Mm.
All of this is a cue of how I exist in life.
100%.
Like, why am I trying to validate like, oh, you see me, hi.
Mm.
No, I'm supposed to be running a fucking race.
Hmm.
And the other piece of it was also like when there was this one point where like there's all these people running like past me that going the opposite way
Hmm.
and I'm running straight this like going forward and I was like, okay, so there must be a turn
It's gonna
coming
be a
up.
turn. Yep. Yep.
There's gonna be a turn, okay? So I should slow down a little bit. Well, those people are running a different race.
Oh.
They're running
Interesting.
a totally different race. They're running
Mm.
like a 5K and they're going really slow. My race keeps going forward. So, oh shit, I'm using other people's times, energy, whatever they're doing. I'm using that to
Circumstances.
gauge how fast I should be pushing. And
Hmm.
so, like, I get all these experiences and all these lessons. And for the next, after I came to this moment, I was like, I'm going to push myself as hard as I can. And I for the next 6 miles I ended up finishing at like a 7 minute pace, 7:30 pace for the next
Wow.
few miles.
Wow.
And all the people who had passed me, I was just lapping, and I just like it was like in this circular zone of intensity and everything that I everything that I fucking needed to put into that
Hmm.
race,
Hmm.
I put into that race, and I ended up finishing I think 20th out of like my class of like 100 men,
Wow.
and and I finished in under an 8 minute mile for the whole race.
Hmm.
So I finished at like a 7:57 minute mile pace for the full run, and
It's amazing.
and I was fucking proud.
Mm.
Like I was so proud of myself. And then like what actually probably meant the most to me is Lindsay and I had been fighting a lot and I was just not being supportive. We were just on totally different pages.
Hmm.
And so I just kind of went and ran the run. I kind of told her, I was like, you know, but we were kind of doing this. And I get done the race and I'm walking, you know, up the hill or whatever, and all of a sudden I look up and she's running down the hill. She's like, "Oh my god!" Like, "Oh my god!" And it was like it really brought us, I think, back together, and I was proud of myself. And if I'm being honest, I felt like at some point, at some capacity, I finally stepped up as a man. Like,
Hmm.
you know, if I'm introspectively looking at it, like I felt like at some capacity she was getting so far away from me because she was accelerating and I wasn't.
Hmm.
That brought me back to like, oh, my fiance is proud of me. She's actually proud of me.
Hmm.
And I needed to do something that made me proud again. Like I
Mm.
needed something for me to feel like this. It didn't matter. I didn't care what anyone said. there was nothing. There was like, and it's a point where you're the only one that knows how hard you work. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can tell, right? Like you can tell, like, oh, I'm actually copping out right now. I'm watching too many things on social media. I'm just staying up late doing nothing. I'm drinking too much.
Yep.
Like there's all these points where you get to really tune in and be like, how hard am I working? And how hard am I pushing myself? And
Mm-hmm.
is it something that I'm proud of? And I feel like that's what I needed, was that moment of, you're going to put it all on the table, you're going to give it your all, and you're going to see what comes out of it. And that led me to running another marathon after that. Like I ran a marathon. I became more into running. That pushed me to the point where now, like recently, I ran an ultra marathon, 62 and a half miles, because I was like, how far can I push the body and the mind? Not because I want to inspire people to become runners. I want to inspire people to see, like, you can overcome whatever limitations you're putting on yourself and your mind. And physical training, whether that's through, running, weightlifting, breath work. Like I love pranayama breathing because it's this intense release. Like I've gotten really into the Wim Hof method over the
Mm-hmm.
last year.
Mm-hmm.
And how far can I push my body to hold my breath? Like
Mm-hmm.
how far can I actually go? And the thing is when we have a physical release like that, it creates the space for us to do more in the other areas of our life. So after these experiences, I'm like, okay, well, me and Lindsay come together and we build our company, the Fitness Project, which is now becoming Ascend Coaching. That's our shift that we're going to be making here soon. And it's like, okay, we have now 7 employees. We've been consistently growing, and the goal is to really continue to make an impact. But it was like, how can I lead for other people? How can I lead my clients? How am I actually showing up? And if I'm not showing up within myself and I don't feel proud, then there's no way that I can do it externally.
Totally.
um, so I feel like I really needed that point of, oh, this is what makes me feel proud, and just recognizing that needed to be there in order for me to get back to my source.
Mm. I've talked about, you know, whether it be online or whatever, and I've written into my upcoming book just the difference between happiness and pleasure. And pleasure is always kind of sought outside of ourselves, whether it be in drugs or sex or gambling or porn, right? Whatever. The pleasure is always like that driver outside of us, which is connected to the ego, right?
Mm.
But then you're talking about more the fulfillment piece, the happiness piece, which is, I love that, where you're really connecting about, I'm proud of myself regardless of any type of external validation, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is so, so important. Um, did you consciously make that decision, or was it just something that you just started doing and then you found yourself aligning into? Does that make sense?
Um, like during the race or just
Yeah.
in general after that?
Through that, more so, just not, yes, during the race, but even more so, it's like you went through a process, of kind of like like shedding some of that external validation, or
Yeah.
need, you know, and it's a
Yeah.
maturity level that you've leveled up on, so more over the process.
Yeah, I would say that I had to. Well, there were some of the beliefs. Like I was trying to be successful. I felt like I had to make a certain amount of money because I needed to support my parents, um, which I was able to do in some capacity. Like I bought my dad a van. Like I did some things, but I was never like, I was trying to fix the problems that they were having by me making money,
Mm,
and that's productive in some sense, but it's not for the work that I do. It's not productive, right? If you're helping people and your sole focus is impact, and that's what you
mhm.
have to do as a coach. If you're a good coach, um, sorry if you're not a good coach and that doesn't resonate, but because I was so focused on making money, I started cutting corners,
Yeah.
where I started to focus more on making money than helping people.
Mm,
And that led me down the point where I was like, oh, this belief that I have that I have to support them is not serving me. It's also not my responsibility.
right.
So I had to come to terms with some of the limiting beliefs that were inside of me
Mm,
that were causing me to feel like it's like that I also need to prove something to someone else. Like, oh, well, I made 6 figures already. I made 6 figures my first year out of college. Well, I need to make 1 million in the next year. And but I also wasn't asking for help either.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even though, like, and I was asking the wrong people for help, and I wasn't being honest about the struggles I was having. I was trying to, like, put on a happy face and be like, oh, there's no struggle. There's no struggle. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want people to know that all these things were happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like I had to get honest with myself. I had to tap back into what made me feel strong again. And I also had to recognize that it was incremental, right? Like, even after that run, I still was in debt. Like, even after that run, I still didn't have any clients.
Mm-hmm.
When I took that month off, I had to go back to Los Angeles for a wedding. Los Angeles, like, I'm supposed to, I moved from New Hampshire to Los Angeles. I was supposed to be famous or like an Instagram like influencer at this point in my life, right? Like, that's like the vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this is really where I think I started to change things. Like, because the run was like a breadcrumb. I took a month off of social media. I took a month off of, like, building the business, and I just
Yep.
focused on the clients that I did have. Like, I did some work, right? So I wasn't like, oh, I'm just taking time off to me. I would go and I would read, and I would be intentional about, like, journaling and thinking through problems, and I would still work on the things that I had on my plate. So it wasn't
Yep.
like I just, left everything. We would go to Los Angeles, and that created a lot of anxiety. Like, I feel like such a failure. Like,
Mm.
I was supposed to come here and, like, dominate, and I actually didn't take any of the opportunities that were here presented to me. Like, I
Mm.
was afraid. I didn't put myself out there as much. Like, I didn't network. And so I decided to take this one time, and I go to Malibu, and I sit on the beach, and I just meditated. I meditated for like 30 minutes out in the sun, and I was like, oh, this is so nice. I should just jump in the water.
Mm.
And I just jumped and swam in the water, and I just, like, was so present. I was like, wow, like, the beautiful landscape of Malibu, which is like my favorite place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so gorgeous. And I'm like, wow. And then I was like, oh, what else do I want to do? I want to go for a run. So I went for a run up and down the beach, and I, like, stretched, and I was like, wow, like, I'm just kind of, like, tuning into what feels like, what is my body and my mind telling me, like, would be really nice right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized that I lived in Los Angeles for 2 years, and I never did that.
Mm.
I was never present. I was always on my phone trying to be someone or look like I was being someone. I was trying to prove something externally
Mm.
rather than being that person. Like, all those things were outside of me.
Mm.
And I was like, holy shit, like, I lived here for 2 fucking years, and I never went to the fucking beach. Like, I never was actually there. Like, I went to Malibu, but if I was, it was like, okay, we got to be there for an hour because then we have a meeting, and, like, we have to do this, that, and the other thing. And I was also competing at the time, so it was like, you structure your meals, you got trained for 2 hours. Like, it was so regimented that I never took a time or gave myself the space to be. And it was beautiful to experience that, but it was also kind of sad. Like, it really, like, I was like, because I remember, like,
Bittersweet.
yeah, like, I remember this moment where I was kind of, like, yelling. I was saying incantations, right? I was like, this is, like, who I am. This is my state. And I was like, this is my home. And I was like, oh, it's fucking not anymore. So I was like, okay, how does, like, there was a really grounding experience of seeing myself through the eyes of what was real.
Mm.
Like, I'd never been really honest with what I was experiencing at that point because I was kind of riding a high. Like, I was like, oh, everything keeps coming to me. Everything keeps coming to me. And I think in that experience, just having that one moment made me so grateful. Like, made me grateful for everything that I had experienced, made me grateful for everything that had actually been somewhat successful. I'd actually hit my first target that mattered to me in my life. I wasn't broken. It wasn't lost. I had opportunity to go now and move forward, and everything was going to be okay. And yeah, I think at that moment started to really turn me inward and say, okay, how are you going to move forward? Because you have no other opportunity, you have no other option
Mm-hmm.
other than to move forward. So that was really, I think, a pivotal moment of peace.
Mm,
more than anything.
mm. I wish I'd known what you know at your age, you know. But the whole idea around, like you said, and you practice it, meditation, breath work. It's bring yourself back to the present moment, right? Which again, I would say a younger version of me be like, man, that just sounds kind of woo woo and it's kind of dumb. Like, dude, I got things to do. I got things to accomplish, and I'm realizing, you know, the younger version of myself is so driven by, you know, uh, just validation and ego and everything that's external, you know. And
Mm.
so I see what you're talking about, and I think it's a good thing to kind of express to other guys. And we talked about when I was on your podcast yesterday, in the sense of like it's the science of achievement, which you were doing, but you weren't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily finding a whole lot of fulfillment because you were just driven, and your life is passing you by, versus having that moment that you hadn't had for 2 years, even while you were living there, so you slowed down and actually connected with what was resonating in your heart. For like, what do I feel I want to do? You know, go for
Yeah.
a run, stretch, meditate, feel the sun on my skin. You know, it's pretty cool.
Well, and the woo woo part of it is real because why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I'm trying to be enlightened and woke? No, I'm doing this because I am out of alignment,
Mm-hmm.
and that is causing me so much more pain. It's like, why are you drinking? Are you drinking because you like to be drunk, or are you doing it because you're afraid? Which was something that one of my clients told me. He's very successful. The guy's worth more money than anyone you'll ever meet.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, why do you feel like you drink so much? He's like, and we start talking and talking and talking. And he's like, when I get down to the core, it's because I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you have to become aware of why you're doing what you're doing. You can, so make no mistake, I want to be, and I mean, our company now is doing extremely well. I have massive ambition. I I want to dominate every single day. That is why I'm here. Not to dominate, but to make an impact. To have a level of vibration within me that can someone can hear this podcast and be like, holy shit, like I need to get fucking going. Like
Mm-hmm.
I want people to live in that state where they feel like they're powerful, they feel like they can dominate. Like one of my clients, he's a dentist, he has a practice, they have 400 employees, they have 40,000 people that come to their practice, and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to fucking quit.
Yeah.
He's like, I just want to quit. I want to sell the practice, but I know if I sell the practice, then I'm not going to make any money. And I'm supposed to like be this successful person for my
Mm-hmm.
kids. And like, I want to give them wealth for long term. And I was like, here's the thing, whether you sell the practice or you decide to step up and actually make the practice profitable and successful, you're going to impact your kids negatively or positively.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to choose to not pay the price. You're going to pay the price. So you have to decide, what do you want to do as you?
Mm-hmm.
As a man, as a person, as a human, like what do you want to feel?
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about the end goal, like let's say you want to make $10 million. The end goal of making $10 million is the emotion that's going to create inside of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Confidence, power, joy, like the emotion is the end goal that you're chasing. Tom Brady wants to feel the emotion of winning the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And he has trained himself to live in that state. He's conditioned his emotions to be the greatest athlete in his sport.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the most talented. Michael Jordan's not the most talented athlete. But he conditioned himself emotionally to live in a state that allowed him to be successful. And he conditioned that. You have to condition the emotion that you want to experience.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that through physical exercise, you do that through breath work, you do that through being with your family, being at the meeting, right? Like you can do whatever, but you have to condition the emotion. If you decide to condition the emotion and you condition it consistently, you're going to create the result. But if you're living in anxiety, what's going to happen? Anxious emotion creates anxious thoughts. Anxious thoughts leads to anxious actions. Anxious actions creates anxious results. If your business is failing, it's probably because you are not in the emotional state that allows you to lead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I teach people is like, hey, what is the pyramid? Like the bottom of the pyramid is your emotional state. Your mental and
Mm-hmm.
emotional state creates everything. Now, if you want to change those, you have to take action. You can take action by asking a good question. You can take action through breath work. You can take action through physical exercise. Changing your nutrition changes the way that you feel. Like all these things
Mm-hmm.
create different emotional experiences out of yourself. Like if you're living in, like I was living in a depressed state, because I wasn't pushing myself and I wasn't doing anything that made me feel good. Like I was doing all the things that were making me feel bad. So, and it's not a blanket state about depression, but anxiety is the same way. Like I'm not creating any structure around this. I'm
Right.
not creating any structure within myself. Like if you're living in chaos, it's because you're consciously choosing to not do anything that would remove the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you talk about removing the chaos, it's not about removing everything that is chaotic about your life. It's about setting something in place that creates some sense of certainty. What's the first thing you can do? You can breathe. You're in anxiety, it literally creates a change in your physiological state to go. So there's tools at your disposal, but you have to ask the question, like, do I actually want to change? Do I actually want to change the thing that's inside of me that's causing me duress? For me, Lindsay was like, hey, our friend is holding this mindfulness meditation course. I think that you should go. I could have said no. I could have been like, nah, you know what? That's not for me. I showed up, and that her name's Sumeda. She was on our podcast, and she's been like our mindfulness, meditation, and spiritual guide for about 2 years. And I'm a pretty tough guy. I'm not. I grew up in the middle of the woods. Um, my dad was a rugged man, and he's a carpenter, and he's a really tough guy. And my grandfather was a Hell's Angel, or at least his stories was that he used to hang out with them. He was never in the biker gang, or he was at least in a biker gang, but he wasn't a Hell's Angel, whatever. The reality that I grew up with was not open to. It wasn't completely rigid and removed of emotion, but it wasn't open to those kinds of things. So you have to be open to seeing that maybe there's something that you could learn from someone else who's a little bit more open than you. It doesn't make you less of a man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which again, I feel like the theme that's kind of weaving itself through this conversation is just the just how tricky the ego can be, and
Yeah.
and how the ego oftentimes will pull us back into scarcity, pull us back into fear, pull us back into a lack of worthiness, you know, and having the humility to ask the right questions, having the humility to recognize when you're not in alignment and doing the work and changing your physiology, all the things that you're talking about, I feel like takes it takes a level of like an awareness and slowing down so that you can take stock of what you're really feeling and how the results are going. Because I feel like a lot of guys that I've talked to, they things aren't working, and yet they keep doing the same thing thinking
Mhm.
that it's going to magically change, you know? But it seems like you've had a really good practice of slowing down or like stopping and taking stock, like I said, of like how are things going? Like, but how are things really going, you know? And then if it's not in alignment with what you ultimately want, makes you feel proud of yourself, it seems like you've really matured in the sense of like, then you just shift. Would that be accurate?
So it's kind of, I use journaling consistently. I journal every day as like a general practice, or at least I turn to it. I have a power list of like, hey, what are the 5 things that make today win? Essentialism is a really great book if you're looking to
Love that.
clean out and declutter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I've always found fascinating and helpful is I've consistently journaled since I was, so when I first started my business, I was living in my parents' house. I had like $800, and I rented a room because I was like, I'm not fucking staying here anymore. Um, I had $34 in my bank account when I paid that first deposit.
Mm.
I remember sitting with a journal and being like, okay, what is the outcome? What am I trying to pursue? I still have those journals. They're awful to read. I'm like, whew, this kid, like, no idea what he was gonna do. But the point is, like, what I find to be helpful is ask the question. Like, think of your life as a math equation. That's all it is. Like this, if you want to get like, what is X? You're solving for X or Y.
Yeah.
So if you're like, what am I supposed to do? You have to put it on paper because in your head you're not actually able to pull things apart. It's like how can you, John? What's 500 times 29?
I would have to pull out my calculator.
Yeah. So but if you had it on a piece of paper, you'd probably be able to do the math a little bit easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in your head trying to do a math equation, well, then it's not very impactful. It's not going to work very well. So if you take your life and the problems that you're facing and you say, okay, well, I probably quarterly, every couple months, what do I want? Why is this causing me stress? Why is this giving me anxiety? Um, Happened the other day. I went down. We were staying in a hotel for an event. I couldn't sleep. If I can't sleep, I find that journaling is helpful because if there's a thought that is continuing to keep me up, it's because I haven't actually broken it down. I haven't given it time or attention, and thinking through it just creates more anxiety because I'm in what if. So I need to get out of what if and actually look at the problem. So I think that the tactical way is just to sit with yourself, and like I like to do it with a cigar and a cup of coffee, uh, and just sit with it and work through it. Because Jordan Peterson talks about like you're picking a star, like a north star in the sky, and you're trying to aim at that star, and you're trying to move close to that star. And what you're going to probably find is it's the wrong star. It's the wrong star. It's the wrong thing to pursue, but at least it's in the sky. At least it's causing you to move forward. And as long as you're moving forward, you can get to the next star. You can get to the next point. But when you're staying in stasis, you're going to die. Like if you don't choose to take a step forward, you're never going to be able to figure out what the actual solution is. So I've tried to adopt that within myself is whenever things aren't going well, it's probably my fault and there's probably something that I'm doing wrong, or there's probably something that I've neglected, and there's a lot of things I do wrong and there's a lot of things that I neglect, and it's just like I think it's a constant process of when things aren't going well, have some way for you to discern that. And that can be through a coach, that can be through a journal, that can be through therapy, that can be through a friend. Um, but when you're just sitting with it inside yourself, I think it's really challenging to figure out what would be the next best option.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like if I could praise that last whole little bit, like it's so poignant, and I think I mean, again, I feel like we could continue chatting up the for hours to come. I think the big part of it for me is just hearing you eh, live by example. That, and this is why I was so grateful to have you on the podcast is because I see you with the whole idea of becoming kings. I feel like we do tap into that king energy often. And guys can tap into that king energy throughout their day. You're talking about like dominating your day in terms of like figuring out your top 5 wins for the day, whatever the case might be. And yet, to me, getting to that place of having become a king is where you do have abundance in all areas of your life, and you don't have to prove to anything to anyone else other than yourself. And so there's a level of consciousness and humility and self-love to where you just know that, like you said, you're taking the action because you're living and breathing, and you know that that makes you more proud and makes you a better version of who you were yesterday, right? But you don't necessarily care about what other people think, right? And you're just living your life and you're at peace and you're fulfilled, but you're also challenged and you're successful, and yet you're also have the depth of relationships and everything else in life. And I feel like, I mean, God, you're so well on your way, which is pretty impressive. Given you haven't even hit 30 yet. But I think it's pretty cool just to see how, um, like you said, there's times when you feel like, oh, again, you're just taking responsibility. You're staying in line with your word, staying in integrity, right? because when you feel like you're out of alignment, out of or you're in stasis where you're just kind of stagnant, you're aware of that, and you're just shifting. And I think it's important for those that are listening and watching to see, like, man, none of us who are quote unquote successful act as if we've got it all figured out. It's just like each, you're gonna have your bad days, you're gonna have your good days, but action coupled with, or I should say, asking the right questions that are introspective, right? And then taking action that's in alignment with that of what you truly, truly want, which is, I keep hearing you say, like, getting really, really clear about what is the end result. It's the
Hmm.
feeling, it's the emotion, and then continue to go. And if you have to pivot, change, choose another star, like Jordan Peterson says, it's like that's what ultimately brings that idea of feeling a sense of pride that you've lived your best life for the day. You know,
I
so
couldn't. Yeah.
what? Tell me real quick as we start to wrap things up. Like, give it, those that are listening kind of an idea of, like, how do you go about planning your day so that you can actually win it, dominate it, feel good about
Mm.
yourself, so that when you're laying your head down on your pillow, you're like, I maybe I didn't check off everything, but I feel good about how I showed up.
I think the key there is starting the week off with that
Mm,
intention.
mm,
Like I spend Sunday, just a half an hour on Sunday, like making sure that everything is set up, making sure that everything, like I know what my week looks like, and then the night before, I give myself 5 or 10 minutes to make sure I know what's happening in the next day.
mm-hmm,
And on the days when I don't do that, things tend to fall apart a little bit. Like,
mm,
you don't show up with the same intention. So I find that it's really helpful for me to just have Sunday set up, especially with our team. Like as we're building out our team, to have everything set in that way, and then be able to make sure that things are set the night before to be like, okay, I know the first 5 things are this, and then yeah, I try to keep it pretty simple though.
mm. Love it.
I find that it's
And
helpful.
yeah, exactly. I think that, yes, I say, which I learned from Tony Robbins, and he probably learned it from someone else, that complexity is the enemy of execution. If I overwhelm
Yeah.
myself and make things way too complicated, and there used to be a part of me like, oh, but if I do this, then I'll get smarter, or this is my way to show, how deep I am, or whatever. Like all these ulterior motives. Like, dude, just keep things as simple as possible. Don't overcomplicate, and just chug away. Consistency is what I really want and really need.
Yeah, well, it's I think that another piece that's like simplicity scales in your
Yeah,
business and in your life.
yeah.
So if you want to
Love it.
scale to the next point, being simple is really all you need.
I love it. Well, for those that could use support, what are some of the offerings or programs that you put out there to help people who are like, oh, this really resonates for me, and maybe they want to get in touch?
Well, so I was thinking about it. I think the best place would be check out our podcast, Conquer the Day.
Mm,
Conquer the Day is the podcast that me and my fiance have together. We talk about all things fitness, health, wellness, personal development, and psychology. So I think it would be a fantastic place. And then if you're interested in connecting, you can check me out at thefitnessproject.us. We have all of our different pieces there, and it's really where a lot of it grows from. So yeah, any way that we can support you, any way that I can help you, give you some feedback, guidance, direction. Always grateful to support you. And I think the biggest thing is just, reach out. And whether it's reach out to me, reach out to Johnny, but find some way to get support if you need it, because I think that's one of the most important pieces is having people in your corner.
yeah, yeah, 100%. And I would also recommend that um, people follow you and your fiance on Instagram. It's Brian Pickowicz, right? And then, but also the fitness project, right? Or is it Conquering the Day?
So
What is
Conquer
this?
the Day is the podcast, and
Yes.
my Instagram is just Brian Pickowitz. So
There you
I
go.
kind of like to keep things simple, right?
Yeah.
Simple
Yeah.
skills.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Amen. There's so much good stuff on there. And it was really fun for me to watch you in the videos of, like, doing your ultra marathon. I'm like, holy shit. I mean, we could do a whole podcast
Mm.
about what you went through in those 24 hours of, like,
Oh yeah.
battling the ups and downs. We'll do that in part two, because I definitely want to get into that, because that's a big deal, man. I'm so impressed. But yeah.
We did a deep dive on our episode of because Lindsay and I kind of ran together. She ran the last 15 miles with me and helped me kind of finish strong. So we did a kind of a couples conversation about the ultra. It's pretty intense.
I'll check that
I
out.
talk about every negative and positive. Imagine experiencing the greatest feelings of your life and some of the worst feelings of your life in the most intense way
Yeah.
in the course of 16 hours. Some people do it through psychedelics. I do it through running. I find that that's a little bit more helpful. I don't lose myself too much there. But yeah, no, yeah, it was something I can't. Remember telling Liz, like, holy shit, I just ran 62 and a half miles in 17 hours, a little under 17 hours.
Wow.
Like, that's insane. Like, that's insane to me. And I tell people that, like, it shocks them and it also scares them. They're like, dude, just go run a mile. Like, go for a walk. Like, just get started. But yeah, no, it's crazy stuff. And Johnny, I really appreciate just the opportunity to come on. It's been a blessing, and you've always been just such a great person in my corner. So really grateful and really blessed to have the opportunity.
Yeah, man. Amen. Well, I hope those that are listening and watching really got some good value out of this. I have no doubt that they did. But reach out to Brian, reach out to Lindsay, follow them on social media, check in with what they're doing because they're leading the way. And I love too that like you don't have to come from a place of acting like you've figured it all out. You're just on the journey, and it's kind of nice to saddle up next to someone who's also on the journey, and that's what I love about coaching and what you're putting out into the world. So, blessings, my brother.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on, and we'll catch up more for part two. And I want to listen to that in-depth dive on like the shit that you went through running that. That's intense. So, anyways,
I'll send it to you, man.
I'll let
Thank you
you.
so much, man.
Yeah, I'll bet you. I'll let you take out your puppy. I'll do the same here because we're gonna both have accidents here behind us, probably on the floor if we don't get out of here. So, thanks,
That would
brother.
be good.
We'll catch up soon, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thanks for checking out this amazing episode of the Becoming Kings podcast. Hope you connect with Brian and Lindsay. And until we meet again, thanks for listening.